got hood mirrors. They are called convex, bug eye, or fish eye. They are for when you turn or your blind spots. Okay? Make sure they're properly adjusted for you. They are clean, not cracked or broken. You can actually grab the actual turn, shake it. Make sure it's securely mounted. Keep working your way up. You got your windshield. Shouldn't be cracked. You should have no illegal stickers. The stickers we are allowed to have, because we're a school, we have a Secretary of State sticker. Illinois requires us to have that. They have numbered the vehicle for a training vehicle. On the front of the driver, you have your safety lane inspection sticker. This one expires every 6 months. Normally, I believe you'll have it done once a year when you have your own trucks. But the school's required to do it twice a year. I should also have paperwork in my door pouch matching that sticker too. The seal around the window should be soft and pliable, not dry rotted or missing, so we don't have any leaks, either air or any kind of water. And my windshield wipers should have proper tension up against the window. All the functions should work. You would test those when you do your in-cab inspection. And the windshield wiper blades should be soft, pliable, not dry rotted or missing. Keep working your way up. You got the lights on top of the cab. The three in the middle are your identification lights. That mean you are a Class 2 division vehicle. You are up to 13 foot 6 inches tall, up to 8 foot 6 or 102 inches wide, longer than 25 feet and heavier than 26,001 pounds. Above that, well, next to on the outsides first, you have your marker or clearance lights. They show everyone how tall and wide you are at night. You have your air dam on top, which scoops the air up over the top of the trailer for fuel economy. Should be securely mounted, no damage. Behind that, you'll have your air horns. You will also test those by pulling on them inside the cab when you do your in-cab inspection. So from there, you'd open up the hood if you get Section A. We'll let you start on the passenger side. Test is done down the driver's side of the vehicle, but there are a few things on this side you would need to talk about, such as the things that are not over there, okay, like your air filter. Make sure the lid is latched down properly. You can see inside here, it should be dry. You should have no debris on the inside. My city horns over here, the wiring should not be burnt or frayed, securely attached, and my city horn should be working. We also have our belts over here. You should have no more than 3/4 inches of play by pushing in the widest part, just by pushing in. If you get too much play on there, it's going to start slipping. You'll hear the belt start squeaking. This belt goes over your air conditioning compressor. It's going to go over your alternator. It's going to go over your fan and your water pump down on the other side on the bottom. Also on this side, we're going to have our oil check and oil fill. This one here you will pull out. Hold flat, wipe it off if necessary. You should be above the add and below the full. If you need to add, you're going to add a whole gallon. That's when this one would come into play. It's got an expansion plug. So you would spin that, loosen the plug, pop it out. Then you can add right in there. When you put that back in, make sure you tighten that plug again so you don't lose your cap. Any hoses I should be checking on this side should be soft, pliable, not dry rotted or missing. They shouldn't be bulging out. That's a sign of them going to burst. You want to make sure they're not leaking anything, and all your clamps on all your hoses are tight. Let's head over to the other side. So on both sides of the engine, you're going to be checking for any kind of leaks that are very obvious to you. Okay, you're looking for any kind of wet marks. You're also checking any of your electrical wiring on both sides to make sure that they are not frayed, burnt, falling off. They shouldn't be touching any moving objects. On the side of this motor here, we have our compressor. We're going to check that for 3 types of leaks: air, oil, and water. On the side of it, or actually this one is mounted on the back of it, you can't see it, is your governor. That's what tells your compressor to turn on and off. It's your governor cut in 100 or below, governor cut out 125. Alright, what else we have over here is our fuel water separator. It should not be milky or cloudy. The fuller it gets, so when that fuel actually gets all the way up to the top of that filter, it's time to have your maintenance done. That means your filter is getting clogged. We also have a starter on this side. Make sure your wiring looks like it's attached properly. Obviously it starts the vehicle without any problems. It should be securely mounted. Your steering parts, your steering wheel and your city horn in the middle of it. You have your steering wheel shaft. Your steering wheel free play on your steering wheel, you should have no more than 2 inches of play on a 20-inch wheel, and you would check that with the engine running. Just wiggle your hand backwards and forwards and watch the front tire. It shouldn't move more than 2 inches. Your city horn should obviously be working, and your steering wheel shaft shouldn't be bent, and you should have no side-to-side motion on it. That would mean your U-joints are getting loose, which is your next part, U-joints. You should only be able to rotate it a little bit. So your U-joints attached to your gearbox, and above your gearbox you have your power steering reservoir. This is one of the other fluids you're going to be checking. And this is one of the only fluids besides your windshield washer fluid you can check when the engine is hot. It has a hot side on the dipstick and a cold side. So when it swells up, you'll have a higher level. You would check the hot side when the engine's hot. Coming off your gearbox, you're going to have your pitman arm, and it attaches to your drag link down here with a castle nut and cotter pin, so that way it has that pin through it so the nut doesn't rotate off when everything's turning. You're going to attach the next part to a steering ring knuckle. It will attach to the spindle, which is on the back of this hub over here. That's what the tire spins on. And then it goes to your steering arm, and then your tie rod goes all the way across, and each side of that tie rod you'll have a tie rod end that has threads on it, so you can adjust it for the toe of your tires or the balancing, things like that, so you don't go crooked down the road. If you're looking for your air dryer, it's straight down here behind the fuel tank. You'll have to look straight through this hole in order to see it. You're going to check that to make sure it's securely mounted. It's not leaking. You would hear air leaking out of it if it was. You want to make sure it cycles properly, which means it actually spits or sneezes when the truck reaches its full governor cutout 125. You should hear that liquid going psh, or the air spitting out the liquid. Alright, your air dryer, so your compressor and your governor are lubricated with the engine oil, all the parts inside there. So you're going to have oil traveling through there. You want to stop that before it gets into the first tank in line, which is your wet tank. It's also building hot air and it's forcing it through small lines, so it's going to build moisture at the same time. That's what that air dryer's function is to stop whatever liquid that bypassed and came out of all that before it goes into the wet tank. Okay, it will not catch it all, so that's why we have to drain our tanks a minimum once a day, and you're going to start with the wet tank. You also want to make sure those tanks are securely mounted and not leaking. Okay? If it has 2 drain valves on one of the tanks, that means it's split into a bulkhead in the middle, so it's got 2 compartments, so you should have 2 drain valves. If it only has one, it's a single compartment. Alright, we have our suspension next. This is a front steer spring suspension. You're going to start off with your frame on the top. You want no repair wells, no cracks, no holes drilled in it. Your spring hanger coming off the frame should be securely mounted, no nuts and bolts missing. The eye bolt on the bottom should be tight because that's what's holding on your mainspring. Your mainspring can have no damage at all, perfect condition. The leaf springs underneath, it depends on how big and badass your truck is. You can have a lot of leaf springs or just a couple. If you have a lot of leaf springs, you will have C-clamps holding all those springs together so they don't twist. In other words, if they started twisting off this way and you turn your tire, you would run the side of your tire right into the leaf springs. So they're designed to stop the leaf springs from twisting on each other. Those leaf springs, you can't have more than 1/4 of any one of those leaf springs missing, cracked, or broken. Keep following it back. We have what we call a USA. You have U-bolts. They go through your axle, and you have nuts on the bottom which holds it all tight to the axle. You have a saddle for the U-bolts to sit on, and on this saddle we have a rubber bumper on the top, so in case it hits the frame, you have rubber hitting the frame instead of your metal U-bolts. And you got your axle, so there's your USA, U-bolt saddle axle. Keep following it back. You have a shock absorber. It cannot be bent. It has hydraulic fluid inside it, so it shouldn't be leaking. It should have rubber bushings on the top and the bottom where it sits on the posts, so it doesn't rattle around. They have to be soft, pliable, not dry rotted or missing. Keep following it back. You have a spring shackle in the back, securely mounted to the next part, which is going to be another spring hanger back to the frame. All of these parts, BBLM, not bent, broken, loose, or missing. Easy way to remember all those parts, BBLM. Next, we're going to have our air brakes we haven't talked about yet. All the parts to your air brake system. We'll start off with your airlines and brake chambers. Okay, that's going to push out your push rod. It cannot have any leaks coming out of that air chamber. It should be securely mounted with no dents, so the springs operate properly. Your push rod coming out of that can't travel more than 2 inches when you apply the brakes, and you shouldn't have more than 1 inch of free play when the brakes are released when you pull on it. It attaches to your slack adjuster. The angle between the push rod and the slack adjuster would vary depending on whether the brakes are applied or released. So applied, it cannot be less than 90 degrees. And when it's released, it'll be a little over 90 degrees. It's going to attach to your S-cam shaft. On the end of that, you will have your S-cams. They will ride on little rollers on the top and the bottom of it. When you step on the brake, that roller will twist and expands the brake shoes outwards into your drums, causing friction. Your brake shoes and brake shoe lining or pads cannot have any cracks on them. You shouldn't have any oil on them from your inner axle wheel seal leaking out from the inside over here. And they cannot be less than 1/4 inch thick. Your brake drum, no repairs, so you can't fix them. No repair welds, guys. And you don't want to see any cracks on it or any oil coming from your inner axle wheel seal leaking. And your return spring should pull your brake shoes away from the drums when you take your foot off the brake. That should be securely mounted, not cracked, damaged, working properly. That should cover all your brake parts and your defects. I don't think I missed anything. The next thing you do is your tires and rims. So if you noticed, I worked from the top up here to the bottom. One thing I have missed on my fluid levels is my radiator overflow. Make sure it's between the add and the full. Shouldn't be leaking. And this is my windshield washer fluid. Should always have enough for the day, depending on what the day looks like. If it's snowy or rainy, keep it full. Your tires, you want this the appropriate air pressure inside. It should be 90 to 110 psi. You want the same size on each axle. If you have 2 different sizes on your steer axle, the truck will lean to one side. 2 different sizes on your duals, one of them will be higher than the other. It won't touch the ground. You want the same type of tire per vehicle. Your truck and trailer are 2 vehicles, even though you're attached. So if my tractor has 1 radial tire on it, they should all be radial. It has a steel belt on the inside of that tire. If one of them is bias ply, they should all be bias ply on my tractor. Those will be inner tube tires. You want no cuts, bulges, or fabric showing from one sidewall across the top to the other sidewall. And your minimum tread depth on your steer tires should be 4/32, no less. That has to be in every single one of your grooves, not just one of them. You want nothing stuck in the tires, nails, screws, glass, anything that could make it leak. And your steer tires up here are not allowed to have any recapped or regrooved tires. The regrooved tires, when they will take a hot blade and cut the grooves deeper. You can do that once. If the tire says regroovable on the side of the tire, this one does. Once you do that though, you will have to move it back to either your drive tires or your trailer. Just look at the tread pattern. This looks like the same as a trailer pattern, so I'd probably go back to the trailer with it. Your drive tires have knobbly tires for your traction. Different tread pattern. A recap tire is when they shave the tire down completely flat and they will glue a new tread onto it. You can usually tell because there's a line going across the top of the tire. It kind of looks like that where the tread pattern joins together. You can also tell because you'll see glue patterns around the edge. is a recap tire. You can tell where it was glued back on, but I can't see the line across it. So your dual tires, you have a 3 by 5 inch space between them, how the tire arches. That's what, the way you get that space is on your bud rims. Be a one piece shaped like a disc. One will face out, one will face in. It gives you your arch between the tires. Because you have your space between the tires, you got to check to make sure you have no objects lodged between them. If there is, get them out. Otherwise, at high speeds, they're going to come flying out of there. And your tread pattern can go down a little thinner. So not the pattern, but the thickness of it. You can go down to a minimum of 230 seconds. When you get to your rims, work from the top and go to the center. So no dents around the edge of the rim. No cracks anywhere on the rim. You cannot fix them, so no repair welds. You got a valve stem. Make sure it's centered in the hole so you can get to it, especially on your dual tires, because you got to get through a hole to get to the back tire. You got 2 types of rims: bud rims shaped like a disc, one piece, and you have Dayton rims, spoke spacers, and lock washers. Your lug nuts, make sure they are all tight. You have nothing missing. They should all be there. If you see rust or shiny circles or possible streak marks coming off those, that's an indication of them being loose. When you get to the center, you got 3 types of hubs. You have the rubber cap hub. You can pop that cap off real simple. Put your pinky finger in, 1 knuckle down, you should be able to touch the top of that fluid. It's 90 weight gear lube on the inside. The other one will be a sight glass. You can physically see the level through the side of it. It's clear plastic. It should be right across the bottom, like the face of a clock, between 4 and 8 o'clock. Or 1 knuckle down, because most of them all still have the plug on it. And there'll be one that looks just like this without the cap on it. It's all sealed up. It's called a sealed hub. That one you cannot check the level on, but you will check all 3 for signs of leaks. So you're looking at splatter marks on the rim, streaking on the rim where it spins and starts streaking outwards. Or if it's leaking really bad, you'll see a puddle on the inside here. Alright, the rest of section A will include your inside cab. We'll go back to that another time. But it also includes your coupling system. Every one of your tests here in Illinois will include your coupling system. So, you have your emergency line. It's always on the driver's side. Your service line will be blue. It's always on the inside. Your red emergency line on the end of it will have glad hands. Inside those glad hands, you will have rubber grommets. They should be soft, pliable, not dry rotted or missing. And the clamp over here is held down with these 2 bolts. They should be tight, so that way when you seal it up against the other one, you'll have two clamps forcing them together when you twist them down. That's what gives you your seal between this rubber grommet and the other one that's inside the trailer. You want to make sure they're attached to the end of your airlines and not leaking properly. In between your 2 airlines, you're going to have an electric line. If it's green and your trailer has ABS, your ABS will function. If it's black, your ABS will not work. So green supplies the trailer with anti-lock brakes if the trailer has it. You would notice that because it will have a little amber light on the back left-hand corner of the trailer. It'll say ABS right on it. If that light lights up and it stays on, you have a malfunction in your ABS. It should go off after you start the truck. All of your lines should be at least 6 inches above the catwalk. You don't want them rubbing on here. This one's a little low right now. You can adjust them. You got springs in the top. All you do is pull through that spring with the loop. It goes up higher. If you don't use them on the trailer, you should put them up here in your dummy coupling. You want to keep all the debris, snow, mud, ice, water out of those airlines. Anything that gets in those airlines all travels through into your brakes in your trailer. So keep them dry. If you do not have a dummy coupling, you can put them together and bungee strap them to the side to the catwalk. Okay? That'll keep the debris out. Where your airlines come out of the back of the cab would be your tractor protection valve. This is what closes when that red knob pops out on your air brake tests, on your fan down. There's a valve inside here that closes and seals off the leak between the trailer and the tractor, if your trailer's leaking in. The rest of your coupling system would be the bottom of your trailer and your fifth wheel. Alright, it also includes your landing gear. So the bottom of your trailer, you cannot have any damage on it. You don't want to see it rusting through like this one. You don't want to see any cracks on the bottom of that. Before you back underneath, you want to make sure your fifth wheel is tilted backwards. It's securely mounted to your frame and it's properly greased, no rust or shiny spots. If you run out of grease on there, you'll feel the trailer kind of skipping behind you when you turn. Instead of being a smooth gliding action, it'll jump. So that's a sign of it needing more grease, besides visually looking at it. When you hook up to the trailer, you want to see no space, absolutely no gap between the fifth wheel and the bottom of that trailer. And you also want to make sure when you look inside the back of that fifth wheel, the jaws are wrapped around the shank of the kingpin. That kingpin cannot be bent. You want to see no damage on it. Before you back onto that trailer, make sure it doesn't have a lock box on it. That way, it's a high value load, they'll put a big cast iron lock on it. You got to get that lock off before you back underneath. When you back underneath, if you have a sliding fifth wheel, make sure it's appropriate distance between the back of your tractor and the landing gear so you don't run your tires or your back of your mud flaps into your landing gear when you turn. A sliding fifth wheel, each hole that you adjust will roughly move 500 pounds forwards or backwards on your trailer. Okay, keep working your way back. Your landing gear has two gears. It has a high and a low gear, depending on whether you push this in or pull it out. When you drive down the street, you want to make sure your handle is stored away so it doesn't flap around and hit somebody. When you drop the trailer, you want to drop the handle, because when you put pressure on those legs, sometimes the handle moves. If you've got it up in here and it moves, you just locked it in place. Now you can't get it out. So when you drop the trailer, we drop the handle. When you drive down the street, the handle gets stored away. Make sure your legs are up all the way while you're driving so you don't catch anything like an arched railroad track. You can pull the tracks up out of the ground or snap the landing gear off. Or speed bumps is another thing you don't really pay attention to, but you're going to be delivering to a lot of parking lots. So this has to be higher than the speed bump. The sand pads on the bottom, that's what the feet are called. They should be level and you should have no debris on the top of them. You have two gears, a high and a low. One's for lifting heavy weights and one's for going up and down faster. Use whichever one is appropriate. And you don't want to see any welds broken or nuts and bolts missing. That will conclude section A on your test.